transfer this to you.
All right, so let me. Oh, I see where you said browser.
You
Okay.
see it? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
But do what you're
Yeah.
comfortable with.
Okay. And then I will cease to see you guys. So I'll wait a few minutes. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to introduce myself while we're waiting for other people to come in. And everyone sees my little Humanity of DEI on the screen. You can put a thumbs up or on my. Thank you. Um, and so my name is Dr. Cherie Crosby Weeks. I work at Manor College during the day. And the reason I decided to do this webinar topic was for some personal reasons and also just to make it a little bit more digestible for folks. And so when I think about DEI, we have a lot of things being said around DEI or DEIA or DEIB or DEIJ. And, when I thought about it, I really said, DEI is really just about being human and seeing the humanity of each other, right? And that involves, looking at what's different about us, each other, or our diversity, really finding a way to how to include each other into our lives and workplaces and spaces, and really thinking about equity, like making sure if there's someone who's not being included, how can we get that person included? And I was sharing with Doug and Dr. Mason earlier about an experience that I had, which I'll incorporate in the story a little bit later. But we're going to get started. And so each of this, I'm going to take each letter and just guide. Oops, yes.
If you don't mind, before we get started officially, I have just a little introduction that I wanted to read, if that's
Oh,
okay.
yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. I appreciate you jumping right in. Hang tight 1 second. Okay. Sorry, pulling that up.
Do you need to see the screen? Do you need to share the screen?
Oh, no, you're perfect.
Okay.
This is great. Leave that right where it is. Okay. So we'll edit this part out so that we can start officially.
Okay.
So good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to see that you're all here. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's webinar entitled The Humanity of DEI by Dr. Cherie Crosby Weeks. First, I'd like to start off by recognizing our very generous sponsors. Our first sponsor is Learnix. They're our bronze sponsor, and Learnix is a free Google Chrome extension that allows students to document their research journey. As students research, Learnix captures their searches, cited visits, time on sites, and notes from websites which can be explored in an organized notes type page, and auto-generated bibliography, and snapshot reports summarizing their journey. So you can learn more about them at learnix.com. I'll put that in the chat shortly. And next we have Edvative Learning. They're a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to making education personal and accessible for every learner. Through the collaborative partnerships, dedication to innovation, and commitment to personalized learning, they aim to make a positive impact in transforming education and empowering educators nationwide. Next is our NEDLA friend, which is Rod's Pulse podcast. In his podcast, Dr. Rod Murray explores topics related to e-learning technologies. So you can find his podcast at rodspulsepodcast.com or anywhere that you normally get your podcasts. NEDLA, a Northeast Digital Learning Association, is a nonprofit organization. We're committed to promoting digital learning for all. So if you're interested in becoming a sponsor or a patron, please feel free to email us. I'll put the email in the chat. You can email our president, douglas.koch@nedla.org. And I'm Dana Mason, which dana.mason@nedla.org. Now, I'd like to introduce our fabulous speaker for this evening, who has put together an incredible presentation. I know that you're all going to love it. Let me introduce Dr. Cherie Crosby Weeks, Program Director for Teacher Education Programs and Professor at Manor College in suburban Philadelphia. Thank you so much. Let me turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. As she said, my name is Dr. Cherie Crosby Weeks, and tonight we're taking to take a different approach to looking at DEI. My approach really thinks about looking at the humans who exist behind that acronym. Um, because I feel personally that we have gotten a little bit too wrapped up in what it is, what does it mean, and not really seeing each other. So tonight, we'll be going through just a briefly what DEI could be from a humanity lens. I'll have some case studies that we can kind of go over, and I'll also share some resources. At the end of the presentation, I actually did create a tool that you could take back to your workplace and use in your workplace or use with your family or use with your friends or even a perfect stranger. And because this is being sponsored by NEDLA and because I love technology, I am, some of the things that were created for this presentation were actually created using Bing's Copilot and Bing's Gemini. And so you'll see in some of the scenarios, um, they were created using that tool with some very clever prompting. So I just want to let you know about that. So we're going to get started. Make sure I'm clicking correctly. Oh, sorry. So the big D we know is diversity. And most people, when they think about diversity, they only think about two things. They think about race and they think about gender, right? And I didn't realize until I started really looking at building this presentation that one of those we already knew was socially constructed, which is race. But the other one actually is too, right? So the concept of gender um, is taught, right? So we know the difference between sex and gender. Um, we don't look at it in that lens. So one of the things when you think about diversity, you really want to think about beyond just race, beyond just gender, right? And whatever um, experiences that you have that have shaped what you think. And so I'm going to give an example. I was telling Doug and Dr. Mason that um, prior to probably the last 6 months, I found in myself that I had developed some really negative views of people who were homeless, keeping in mind that my family was evicted when I was young, and we were technically homeless for several years, living at the Pike Motel in Springhouse, Pennsylvania. And so, fast forward from being a teenager, I came up into my young adulthood, and I was at a conference and I remember I saw a man sitting outside of the McDonald's on Broad Street, and it was pouring down rain. People were walking past him as like he didn't exist. And I looked in my pocket and I said, oh, I don't have a 5 and I don't have time to go into McDonald's and get him a meal. But in my wallet, I had a 20. And so I said, you know what? I'm gonna give him the 20. So I'm walking really fast and I just kind of handed him the 20 real quick. I didn't throw it at him, but I just handed it real quick. And I'm like beelining. The man grabs my wrists. And so I tug, like, he's going to kill me. And then I look at him and he mouths to me, thank you. And then fast forward to a year ago, I had a woman, I live in Norristown, and a woman one night came in October and she clearly was homeless. It was cold. And I was like, cool, it's cold. If you need to sit in the hallway, that's fine. I get it. But then she started to linger and she actually stayed in that hallway and was sleeping in the hallway, had her clothing in the hallway, all sorts of things for about almost 5 months. And I can't tell you the very negative and nasty things I thought about her, right? And what it made me realize is that when we think about diversity and when we think about what impacts how we view that, um, sometimes our biases get in the way, right? And, for some of us, we have learned that being biased is a bad thing, right? I don't see that. I see being biased as being human, right? All of us have some type of internal bias, either learned, passed on, or just acquired for some reason, right? And we're not meaning to treat someone differently, but our biases cloud our judgment. So I want you to think about it. You can put in the chat or you can unmic yourself. When we think about diversity, or when you think about diversity in your workplace, in your social circles, or just in life, what other things should we be talking about that we might not be including when we think about diversity? And Dr. Mason, if you read the chat for me, that will help.
No problem. I'm keeping an eye.
All right.
Disabilities,
Disabilities. Okay. Both visible and hidden, right? What else?
age, education, variances, etc.
Mm-hmm. What else?
Marginalized groups,
Marginalized groups. Someone can give me one more and then I'll talk about some that are missing.
income, youth are two others that were added.
Good. Income and youth. And that was one of them I was thinking about, was the socioeconomic status. And some of you may have seen about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago or so, Ava DuVernay released a film called Origin, which is from Isabel Wilkerson's book, Past the Discomfort of our disconnect, something of the comfort of our disconnect or something. But the film is all about caste systems across the world. So the caste systems that exist in the US, in India, Germany, and so forth. And a lot about one of the things in terms of diversity that we don't realize in terms of our biases is around socioeconomic status, right? I'm quite sure we're not going to go through the long list of things people say when someone is either poor or unhoused, meaning they are experiencing homelessness, or anything under in between. But that's one that people don't often say always when we think about diversity. The other thing is culture, right? And keeping in mind, culture does not mean race. Culture does not mean ethnicity. Now, those two things can exist within your culture, but for every unit of a person, everyone's family, everyone's has their own unique culture. So if I use myself, I'm African American. Not every African American has the same culture, depending on where you live in the country. It can be different. There's some similarities based off of history, but not, you can't say that one Black culture is the same as the next, right? Any other thoughts that people have around the big D or diversity before I move on? Or anything you think is missing from the list?
The learning differences.
Learning differences, yes, learning differences. And that's a hard one in the workplace. I know for me, I have a lot of biases around people that have bachelor's degrees or above. So in my head, I feel like if you have a master's degree, you should be pretty set in figuring things out, right? But I had to learn over my life that that's not always true based off of people's learning differences. Some people just have learning differences that are very different than mine. And I have to accept that and work with that, right? I'm going to show you a quick clip. There's a nice act. They take the word diversity and kind of talk about what each letter means. I'm going to try to pause when that pops up. But if not, I will read it out loud because it's real quick. But at the end of the presentation, I will give you a copy of this. So you'll have that video. You'll be able to watch it. So I do this correctly.
Mm-hmm.
You guys seeing the video?
You can see.
All right, let's see if I can go back and actually play that back. So I want to pause here. One of the reasons I picked the video um, is because a lot of trainings that I've gone through uh, in terms of DEI, we always would focus in on what was similar, right? We were hesitant to focus in on what makes us different, right? Um, and from my perspective, when we're thinking about humanity, we do have to appreciate the differences that we have and also see how those differences connect us to one another, right? And so here you can see it says diversity, different individuals valuing each other regardless of skin, ideology, talents, or years. So I'm going to give you an example that happened last night. I've been volunteering at the shelter. And so there's been a woman there that I've been talking to for several weeks. You know, when I see her, I ask her how she's doing and blah, blah, blah. So the other night I came in and I was sitting at the table. Me and her were like talking for like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. And so she lets me know that she's got a new job and she's going to have better benefits, and that she's finishing up her GED and her classes for ESL. And so I said, and I knew she was from Norristown. And I said, oh, where are you taking your classes? And she says to me, I'm taking them at the Literacy Council, which is in Norristown, the heart of Norristown. And I said, oh, wow, you know, I have a friend that used to work there. And she says, you know, Miss Tanya. And I looked at her and I said, Tanya Lawrence? And she said, yes. And so this woman knows Tanya and has known her for years. And, you know, and so my point of saying that is that you never know how we're interconnected by our differences, right? You know, I've never met this woman prior to seeing her at the shelter. And, but probably 10 or 15 years after her association with my friend, and I've known my friend for almost 30 years, I met this woman. So, some other thing, now we're going to go into the big E, um, which is equity. And this is one that often gets debated. I've heard people say, well, I believe in equality. Has anyone show a thumbs up? Anyone ever heard someone say that? If you say, we need to be working on equity, and the person might say, well, I believe everyone should be equal. Has anyone ever heard that in your conversations? You can put a thumbs up. Dr. Mason, you can let me know if it's thumbs up, yes or no, in the chat.
Yes, we have some thumbs up for sure.
Okay. I always have to remind people that equality can never exist if we don't give people what they need to get there, right? And somebody said something about learning differences, and we have things about socioeconomic status. Everyone needs certain tools, resources, opportunities to make equality exist. And equity is how we get there, right? So equity really is about, if I'm in a classroom with someone and I work with someone and I might need this to be a great teacher, another person might need twice as much. Giving that person, the other person twice as much is not a bad thing, because that's what they need so that we both can be on a level playing field. But I ask you to think about what might this look like in a digital space. So all of us who are here tonight, some people work in education, some people work in the nonprofit sector, outside of education. When you think about in digital spaces, what does equity look like? Or what are some issues around equity that exist in digital spaces?
We have giving people choice. Someone shared in the chat.
Giving people choice. Choice is a powerful thing. Every human needs autonomy, and that you have to have choices to do that. What else?
Accessibility.
Accessibility, right? You know, I'll give you another story about that. One time I was doing a training last summer, and I was doing a book club, and I was all excited. You know, we're on the book club, and my colleague who's working with me, she's like, Cherie, there's somebody in the chat with the author's name. And I'm like, what? I was like, well, let them in, but if they're like a Zoom bomber, we're just going to kick them out, right? So it was the author. But while I started doing the facilitating the book club, there was a woman in there who was part of the deaf community. It was very clear um, by how she spoke and some of the things that she was requesting. So prior to building that slide deck, I was trying to be really conscious of accessibility, making sure that, you know, if we're using Zoom, people have access to closed captioning, because I know I talk really fast. Sometimes my voice drops, that kind of thing. And also having, and also that the videos were closed captioned. So we go through the whole slide deck. Every single video is closed captioned. But the last one that the woman was really, really excited about, right, was not. And she's in the chat. She's like, Cherie, there's no closed captioning. There's no closed captioning. Do you have a trend? And I swear I felt like I was the devil. I felt so bad. And I said, that will never, ever happen again. And I remember going back and playing the whole video. I went to Otter. I used Otter AI to do some transcriptions of videos, and I transcribed the whole thing. And then I emailed my other colleague. I was like, can you find this woman or just send it out to everyone, because I feel really bad. She really wanted to hear that. So accessibility, a lot of people don't think that accessibility matters, but it does, you know. It's one of the reasons I use Zoom now, because of some of its AI features. And so like if I'm working with a student, I'll say, hey, do you want me to record? Because Zoom's going to create us a nice little summary. It'll create us a to-do list. And, you know, I do that to be more accessible for the other person I'm working with. We don't have anybody who's working at a college, or any people working in K-12, university early learning program, any people from that sector.
We have higher ed.
Higher ed.
It used to be K to 12.
Okay. So if we think at a college, and we think about students, staff, faculty, administration, what needs to be in place for it to be an equitable space outside of cash? We know cash, that's a given. That's probably number one on a lot of lists. But outside of cash, what needs to be in place for that to be an equitable space that everyone, students, staff, faculty, administrators, the cleaning crew, everybody can thrive? What needs to be placed and might be missing from your space?
There were a couple suggestions before that might also fit. Access to basic needs, and someone else had mentioned before, access to high-speed internet, different digital tools like cell phones versus computers, as well as language access.
Yeah,
And a
right.
few more popped up now: representation, equity pay, acknowledgement, and respect.
Yes, yes. I was telling prior to coming on tonight, I was telling that today I was in a meeting on Zoom, and I was at work, and I was trying to participate in the meeting. And I kid you not, 10 times I got kicked out of Zoom because of the bandwidth in my office. 10 freaking times. And I was so angry. I was just so angry. So I'm writing my provost, I'm writing my dean. I'm like, listen, I said, I'm trying to grade. I can't grade. I can't open up Google because you need the bandwidth. I can't participate in the Zoom. I said, I might have to go out to my Toyota and actually use my car internet, right? Now, I don't know if anything's going to be done about that, right? But for me, that's what I need to work equitably in my space is to have bandwidth that works, right? Anything else that you can think about in that space, and then I'll pick one more.
A positive culture that values diversity. And someone else had mentioned digital spaces and first remote and dispersed. So remote and dispersed. So building on accessibility, fostering an environment of inclusion, which drives engagement and social wellness.
Yeah. And I want to kind of touch upon all of those and something else somebody said before about representation. Um, we know in higher ed and probably in K to 12, let's be honest, particularly in the state of Pennsylvania, there are a lot of excuses that are given about why the representation does not exist. Um, but it's not the excuses are really false because it's a system that we have that has produced the lack of representation, right? In terms of, repeat those again for me, Dr. Mason.
Sure. Positive culture that values diversity.
Okay.
And do you want me to repeat a few more?
I'll start with that one, then I'll have you do the other one, the others. Positive culture. You can't have humanity in your space if people can't, if the culture is toxic. Toxic culture will actually kill folks. I kid you not. It will cause you to have a slow death or a quick death. So I don't know how we get our culture to change, right? There's a lot of moving parts in that, but I think it's undervalued how important um, a positive culture is. And I always tell people, like, if you go into your work office or you go into a space and people look like they're auditioning for The Walking Dead, you're in trouble. Like if people just all the time look like they haggard, and we all have friends or colleagues who, like, regardless of what's going on in their life, they still have a positive aura, right? Which then helps you to do the same. So go ahead, Dr. Mason, with the other ones.
Sure. We have digital space and FERS remote and dispersed. So building on accessibility, fostering environment of inclusion, participation, which drives engagement and social wellness.
So for the digital space, I need a little bit more context of what you're trying to say. And you can unmic yourself if it makes it easier, or just put it in the chat.
Maybe they'll write it in the chat. We have
Okay,
a few others.
go
Um,
ahead.
acknowledging respect, and there are two new ones as well.
Okay, so acknowledging respect, keeping in mind that everyone's definition of respect is different, right? There's some global things that we just do to be respectful, but sometimes you do have to ask or really pay attention to, um, you know, how a person interacts with you. So like for me as a human being, I'm a person that if you email me and it requires a response, I'm gonna respond to you fairly quickly. I'm not gonna let it linger unless it just gets buried in a pile of emails. I'm gonna let it be there, right? But do I get that in return? No. A lot of times I'll send emails, crickets. I feel like putting a desktop picture on my screen that just says cricket, like nothing, right? Days, days, days. And I'm thinking like, maybe that's how they deal with email. But for me, when I receive that, and I don't verbalize this enough, I do it with my students, but I don't necessarily do it with my colleagues. I say, you're basically saying F you to me. Like, you don't matter. That's the way I perceive it. Now, that might not be the intent of the person, but that's how it's landing for me. And that's one of the things in terms about respect. We do have to have a communication with each other about what does that mean for each other. We do have to talk about what are our expectations for our relationship in the workplace or outside of the workplace and things like that. Give me two more, Dr. Mason, because I'm being conscious of time.
Perfect. We have cultural humility.
Mm, mm. And just the term humility, I think, is really important. For me, when I think about cultural humility, I realize that I don't know everything, right? The other day I was talking to a young man and he was telling me, I was telling him, about the snacks. So in my office, I give kids snacks and he was going to help me with the snacks when I went down to North Carolina to see my husband. And so he's telling me that he was going to be able to come in one day, but not this day because he was taking care of his brother. And I said, "Oh, what's going on?" I said, how old is your brother? And he's like 17. And then he's like, I said, "Well, where's your parents?" And he says, "Oh, my parents are going to Haiti." Now, I'm quite sure he saw my face drop, right? Because he presents as a Hispanic, white facing person. I never thought that he had Haitian roots. So apparently his mother, or either his mother or his father, their mother was Haitian, right? But my perception or my biases around what does that look like got in the way. So I had to have some humility and some acknowledge to him that I'm sorry that I did that. And he's like, "Oh, it's okay." I said, "Well, no, it's not. Now I understand," that kind of thing. All right, so I'm gonna move on to the big I. Um, the big I is all about being inclusive, um, and keeping in mind that a person can be in your space, they can enjoy their work, they can be the most positive human being, they can be well liked and still not feel included. Okay. There are millions of people who feel I've been this way as a person before, and it's inclusion is not given, right? So I'm going to give you there's two scenarios that I kind of and before I give you the scenarios, inclusion just is really about the person's personal feeling of belonging. So just because you say you belong here doesn't mean that the person thinks they do, right? Just because you put a certain picture up or manifest something to make it look like it's inclusive doesn't mean it is, right? You really have to ask people or ask questions or have conversations to really get that out whether a person feels included. So I'm going to give you um, two examples. One is of feeling included and one is feeling excluded. And this is the portion of the presentation that was created with Mr. Co-Pilot or Mrs. Co-Pilot. And I'm going to give you the example. So the first one is, this is included. It says, imagine a new employee, Alex, who has just joined a software development team. On his first day, the team leader organizes a welcome lunch where everyone includes themselves and shares a bit about their roles and hobbies. The team leader also sets up a mentorship program where Alex is paired with a senior developer who helped him understand the projects and the processes. The team encourages questions and values Alex's input in the meetings, and even though he is new. They also have regular team building activities to cater to various interests, ensuring everyone feels comfortable and included. This makes Alex feel valued, heard, and included. So if I said to everyone who's on the call, in the past decade, if you switched jobs, was this your first day or first week? Dr. Mason, you can let me know how many no's or yeses.
I got a yes. And then we also have someone who wrote not at all. This would have been nice for sure.
Okay. The yes person was blessed. Okay. Because the average person does not get this experience, right? The average person gets hired in a rush, thrown in a desk, given a computer, and it's Hunger Games, and that's it, right? This is the ideal situation. This is where we want to be. It takes a lot to get here, but it's not impossible because we have a yes on our call. Now, this is the excluded version. Now, consider another scenario where new employer Bella joins a different team. Unlike Alex's experience, Bella's team does not have a formal onboarding process. She is expected to figure out the projects and the processes on her own. During meetings, her attempts to contribute are often overlooked, and the team rarely seeks her input. The team also has social events, but they are centered around activities that Bella doesn't enjoy, and no effort is made to accommodate different interests. Bella feels left out and excluded, which can negatively impact her work performance and overall job satisfaction. So now I have a question. How many people have had this experience? And how do you think, what's going on in Bella's head?
So someone who had responded before said their last two jobs differed from Alex's experience, but the current job had aligned. And then someone had written in and said that she doesn't fit in.
Doesn't fit in. Right. Okay. All right. I'm watching my time because I know I'm very long-winded sometimes, but here's some of the resources before we get to the case studies, and we might only be able to do one or two case studies, but as I said, I was telling Doug and Dr. Mason that I am a heavy reader, and this is from a book called Diversity is Not a Dirty Word, Harnessing the Power of Inclusion to Create Anti-Racist, and I forget the rest of the thing. But this quote stuck with me because when we have inclusive spaces, we do see the entire person. We celebrate the entire human being. And you can't really have an inclusion if you're not stopping and asking a peer, are you okay? Do you need help? How's it going? Or remembering that there was a special event in someone's life, right? Inclusion does take work. In order to see someone and kind of include their entire being, you have to get to know them. You know, I often tell my students, and when I was a program director in the field in early childhood, I would tell my teachers and my staff that I cannot work with people if I don't get to know you. I cannot serve you well. And I use the word serve because it's not the other way around. Well, without getting to know you, right? It's really, really important. Another quote from that same book is, we must appreciate those who are different from us and value the differences as much as we do the similarities. So when we think about this DEI work, really to do the work, if you're only doing it in a circle of people that look just like you or have the same socioeconomic status as you, the same gender or sex as you, or same abilities as you really will continue to have a more narrow view of the world. It's not on purpose, but it will limit your experiences. It also prevents you from really seeing someone and including a person, right? So like every day when I meet someone new, particularly if I'm working with the unhoused, I make sure I have conversations with people. I make sure that I ask questions like, how are you doing? What's going on? You know, and people want to talk about their experiences. But they want to do it in an authentic and safe way. So the heart of this presentation is really thinking about, before you do any DEI work, before you even try to create a statement, a page, a website, whatever your institution or organization is doing, you have to understand that there are people behind the words. There are people behind the acronym. And if you're not leading with that, it doesn't help us. So I'm going to pose some questions. I'm not going to ask you to respond because I would like to do one scenario with you guys and answer any questions people might have. But there were 4 questions. I think there's 4. That's actually 7 questions that I came up with that you can think about answering for yourself. And these questions, when you get the PowerPoint, you'll actually be able to see them in the notes section. So no worries about trying to write them down. You'll be able to get them. The first question is, how does fostering a diverse and inclusive environment contribute to the overall growth and success of an organization's, right? Organizations that don't figure that out, they either do 2 things, well, 3 things. They either survive and just do the status quo. They either die, meaning they become obsolete, or they actually cause harm to the people they're actually trying to serve. And I'm gonna leave it. I want that to linger and for you to think about that. Second question, can you share an example of how you've personally contributed to promote DEI in your previous role or experience? This question reminds me that it's not the committee's work. It's not the president's work. It's not the provost's work. It's not the CEO's work. It's everybody's work. Because if we're looking at DEI, it's about being human. It's about treating people with basic human respect and humanity. And if you're doing that, you actually will be doing the work of DEI. You will see that you will naturally fall into it. Number 3, how do you ensure that all voices, particularly those from underrepresented groups, are heard and valued within a team or organization? And we all know that for some of us, we work in very homogenized, historically homogenized institutions. They're either all white, either all Black, or either all something in between, right? And we have to acknowledge how we got there, right? And that piece sometimes is a hard pill to swallow, right? And I always caution people that if an underrepresented group does not say anything about their treatment, doesn't mean that everything's okay. It just means that they said, why bother, right? Nothing's going to be done. And I'm sure you've heard that in conversations in your sectors. 4th question, how can organizations ensure that their DEI initiatives are not just checkbox exercises, but are generally integrated into the culture and values, right? Again, DEI is something that you do every week. And it's not an event. Like when we relegate it to just events, that's when we get in trouble. And I'm not saying that we can have an event, because events do bring people together, but it's a very narrow view, and it kind of prevents us from actually doing the work all the time. Last 3 questions. What strategies can be employed to make sure that that equity is considered in decision-making processes at all levels of the organization? So as humans, we have a responsibility that when we see unethical or unequitable practices, to speak up. Sometimes we can speak with our voice. Sometimes we speak with our words, right? I had something that recently happened. I didn't particularly think it was very equitable. It took me about 10 minutes to speak up. It took me about 10 minutes to speak up. Now, was I that way when I was much younger? No. It took me a while to acquire that ability to do that. But if more of us did that, we would solve some of these problems. The next one is, how can we measure the impact of DEI initiatives on the well-being and productivity of employees? And how can organizations create safe spaces for open dialogue about DEI issues without fear of judgment and reputation? Excuse me, my phonics is very hard. Reputation. I'm not gonna even try to say it because I'm gonna butcher it. But that's important, because a lot of people will not come to the table because they don't feel safe, right? Keeping in mind that that means everybody, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race. All right, we have 3 case studies. I'm gonna quickly show you what they are. and we will pick which one we want to do because we're only going to do one, and we'll kind of go through it. The first one is an admissions dilemma. Second one's microaggressions in the classroom. And the third one is hidden curriculum in the textbooks. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to show you after this the resource document that I'm going to put in the chat that has all the different scenarios that are not just this. This is one section. What's the preference? 1, 2, or 3? The one with the most votes is the winner.
Okay, so we have, let's see. So far, number 2 is in the lead.
Right?
Anyone else want to suggest? All right, I think it's number 2.
All right, we're going to do number 2. Now, this could be microaggressions in the classroom. It could be microaggressions in the office. It could be microaggressions at PHL, meaning Philadelphia International Airport. Okay, so here's the scenario. A professor uses language or jokes that unintentionally alienates some students. Now, think about what types of things that professor might have said, which are microaggressions. What might be the impact on that student? And what could the professor do to make the environment more inclusive in the future? So this can be from your personal experience or from something you heard from, if you have children that they've experienced. But what are some of the things that professors do or say that they don't realize they're alienating their students?
You are not ready.
Oh, you are not ready, right? You don't even know me outside of my test score, but you said I'm not ready, right? That is a very, me personally, if I was a student today and someone told me I'm not ready to do X, Y, and Z, I would be very offended if they didn't actually know my story as a human being. That's a good one. What's another one?
Maybe you should look at something else that's suitable to your experiences.
Oh my God. Again, whether we believe it's true or not, that's a dream killer. It really is. It's good intention, right? It's good intention. Like you don't want somebody to go down a rabbit hole. But if a person is an adult, so once they become an adult, age 18, they have to learn to make their own choices. They have to learn to live with their own consequences. And if we, how do I want to say it, craft how it's supposed to be. So I'm going to put you in this box. I'm going to put you in this box. I'm going to put you in this box. You destine your students for particular life. And so, quite frankly, for some of us as professors, some of our students, we're guaranteeing that they will be poor because of how we treat them and what we say to them. For others, we're guaranteeing that they might be, a millionaire. Give me one more. And then I'll kind of go over the resources. Go ahead.
But he says ignoring students.
Ignoring. Even if granted, there are some students that I don't want to say you hate them, but they really get under your nerves, right? But we can't ignore, right? So some of this, when we think about what a professor can do to be more inclusive, begin your semester or class with getting to know your students. If you're not comfortable in doing that, do a survey, craft questions that will allow the students to give you a taste of who they are. You can even do that in your assignments that pulls out information that you don't normally get. Trust me, if a student trusts you, they will tell you a whole lot of stuff that you don't want to hear, but it's necessary for you to deal with them and treat them with respect. The other thing is, I always say, in the advent of the internet, we can now record ourselves. You can actually ask a peer to watch your recording, right? So if you notice that you're not connecting with your students and you're not sure if it's something that you're doing, have a colleague watch your recording and just look with a second pair of eyes to say, hey, do you realize that you're doing X, Y, and Z? Do you realize that you're only using um, um, people from a certain group and kind of ignoring another group? All right, so I want to kind of give you some resources. So this scenario thing, it's in the chat for you. Let me do. So in the chat, I'm putting both the PowerPoint and the scenarios for you. The scenarios, this was all created using Bing's Gemini or Copilot. And basically, I did some prompting there's some higher ed examples. There are some teaching examples, different categories. You can see there's different categories all through here. Under each area, you will see some actual real resources that you can use that might help to address some of those scenarios. I'm a person that I like to give people resources that they can read in their leisure or on a good rainy day. And so those are resources that if you're doing this with a small group of people on your campus, you can use to facilitate your own peer learning group or faculty learning group to kind of discuss what would we do, right? In the back of the presentation, if I go back to this, I have some resources. I have racial justice work at work. This is in its second edition, Practical Solutions for Systemic Change. This is the second edition. This book, I'm going to actually read something from it. If you have not seen this book, it's Our Hidden Conversations, What Americans Really Think About Race and Identity by Michelle Norris. Connected to that book is the Race Project, which I'm going to pop up and show you in a second. And then the book Together, How to Connect, How the Concept of Ubuntu Will Change How You Live, Work, and Lead. And so let me bring up the Race Project so you can see that. So the Race Project is a book by Michelle Norris. Michelle Norris used to work for NPR, and about 12, 14 years ago, she decided to, is there something in the chat?
No, I added the link.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Sorry. So when she first started the Race Project, she sent out postcards. So she would leave postcards at like Barnes and Noble, all these different places. And all it had was race, your thoughts, 6 words, please send. And she had, I'm going to come off of stop share so I can show you the book. She had millions of people sending stories. So this is the cover of the book. It's pretty thick. And the book is full of stories. So when you think about tonight and you're thinking about the humanity of diversity or DEI, this is what this is. So I'm just going to read some of these and then I know I'm running over, Dana. I just want to read a few, and then if anybody has a question, just for the context. So I'll just read a few to kind of give you. One was by this woman, Nancy Ellen. Farley in Sacramento, California. She said, ignore the cover, read the book. Another one is Maria Roach from Bowie, Maryland. She says, my beautiful Black boys deserve hope. She says, my children are too young to understand racism. They see people in three categories: families, friends, neighbors. But I see the moms who fearfully pull their children off the playground when my family arrives. There are good people and bad, judged by actions, not by skin color. And then I have one more. Now, if I said to you the name Jamal White, Jamaal White, what do you think is this person's race or nationality based just by the name? Now, some of you might say, oh, they could be anything, but like, be honest. What's the first thing that pops up in your head? Black
So
American.
said Black American.
Yes. I'm going to get real close to the screen. He's white. His name is Jamal Allen from Des Moines, Iowa. And so at the end, it's a whole story from him. But at the end, he says, so no, as a white man, a majority of majorities from a small rural town in Southern Oregon with a high school of around 400 students and 2 Black and 2 Hispanic families. I don't know a lot about race. I do, however, know a little about stereotyping. Now, how powerful is that? So I highly recommend this book. Anybody want to do a book club, let me know, because I'm ready. Any questions? And I want to thank everyone. I see some familiar faces. Thank you for coming and sharing. And my friend Tanya, if you know my friend Tanya, don't tell her that I said her name. She's gonna kill me. But any questions or thoughts from tonight? Thank you, Rosa. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you. Thank you, Alexa. So I just want to let you guys know, feel free to reach out. I'm on social media everywhere. So if you just want somebody to bounce some ideas out or continue the conversation, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm a very social being. I like to have conversations with people about this. So, all right, Miss Dana, I'll let you take it.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation. Enjoyed thoroughly every minute of it. So thank you so much for all that you put together. And thank you everybody for coming this evening and joining us and being there for this great discussion and participating. Before we end our event, I just want to again recognize our sponsors, Learnix, Advative Learning, and Rod's Pulse Podcast. Finally, I also want to direct everyone to www.nedla.org to sign up for our next webinar. So we've actually got one that's going to be focused on STEAM education for STEAM Month. So NEDLA presents Teaching Ordinary Subjects in Extraordinary Ways with Lieutenant Colonel Michael Catania, Blair Patrol. And that'll be March 19th at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. So thank you guys so much. Put that in the chat. And sorry, talking and typing is always a challenge. But thank you all so much. And thank you so much to Dr. Cosby Weeks. This was a fantastic presentation. Wishing everybody a wonderful evening and hope to see you next month.
And Dana, I gave you back host.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay.
Oh.